now let us try and obtain the high frequency optical response of metals. Like I said, we have to use the Maxwell's equations, and there are actually 4 Maxwell's equations. So the first of the Maxwell's equations is the Gauss's law, which is given by del dot E is equal to 0 in a neutral material, which actually is a metal, in a neutral medium, neutral in the sense electrically neutral medium. And then we have the second equation, which is analogous for the magnetic field, which is del dot H equal to 0. This is always the case, and this what it means is that it is the absence of magnetic monopoles. So you don't have a magnetic charge. So this is going to give me what is absence of magnetic monopoles. And then I have the Faraday's law, which tells me that del cross E is equal to minus 1 by C dH by dt. This is the Faraday's law, which says that a this thing time varying magnetic field always introduces an electric field, induces an electric field. And then we have the Ampere's law, which is the equivalent of the third equation of Maxwell's, but the equivalent of Faraday's law, but in terms of magnetic field. So it is del cross H is equal to 4 pi by C times J. J is the current density, and this is the experimental observation. But Maxwell also introduced the fact that time varying electric fields also give rise to magnetic fields. Because of that, he has added this down 1 by C del E by del T. So these are the 4 Maxwell's equations, and let us see how we can apply them. What we will do is look at del cross E. So this is actually equal to minus del squared E. It's quite easy to work out. I will leave it to you to do it, plus gradient of del dot E. Okay. Now in our medium, del dot E is equal to 0. So because of that, since del dot E is equal to 0, what we have is del cross E is equal to minus del squared E, and I can also use the third Maxwell's equation, which is a Faraday's law, by saying that it is del cross minus 1 by C del H by del T is equal to minus del squared E. Or I can write minus del squared E minus del squared E is equal to minus 1 by C del by del T del cross H minus 1 by C del cross H, and that will give me nothing but minus 1 by C del by del T of what is del cross H equal to 4 pi sigma by C, 4 pi sigma by C plus 1 by C del by del T times E, where I have used the fact that J is equal to sigma times E. Now supposing I have an electric field E, which is time varying, like E naught e to the minus I omega t, then what happens is that I get the following: minus del squared E is equal to omega squared by c squared 1 plus 4 pi I sigma by omega e omega, which is e naught omega, let us say. Here it is quite straightforward because I have cancelled e to the minus I omega t on both the sides after doing the differentiations. Now what it means is I can write it down as minus del squared e naught omega as equal to omega squared c squared, omega squared by c squared times epsilon omega times e omega, and epsilon omega is given by 1 plus epsilon omega is the dielectric constant, and epsilon omega is given by 1 plus 4 pi I sigma by omega. Now what we can do is actually use the expression for sigma which we obtained earlier. So I can show you the expression for sigma that we obtained earlier, which was sigma naught upon 1 minus I omega tau. So this is the expression that I used. Let me highlight it. So this is sigma naught upon 1 minus I omega tau. So I can actually substitute it in this place. So this I can write it in the form 1 plus 4 pi I sigma naught divided by 1 minus I omega tau times omega. So this can be simplified a little further to obtain epsilon omega is equal to 1 plus 4 pi I sigma naught divided by omega minus I omega squared tau. And what we will do now is look at the high frequency response, which means that omega squared tau is far greater than omega, as we are looking at omega tau far greater than 1. So if this happens, then I have epsilon omega is actually given by 1 plus 4 pi I sigma naught divided by minus I omega squared tau, and i's cancel, and what I will get is 1 minus 4 pi sigma naught upon omega squared tau. Well, this can be simplified further by noting that sigma naught is equal to Ne squared tau by m, and if we substitute for Ne squared tau by m, then what we will get is epsilon omega is equal to 1 minus 4 pi Ne squared tau by m omega squared tau. So taus go, and what we are left with is 1 minus 4 pi Ne squared divided by m divided by omega squared, and this quantity 4 pi Ne squared by m is called the plasma frequency, and I will tell you how physically it comes about. So this is equal to actually 4 pi Ne squared by m is the square of the plasma frequency, and what we will get is 1 minus omega p squared by omega squared. So this is the expression for epsilon omega. Now how does the plasma frequency come about? So it is quite easy to see how the plasma frequency comes about by looking at a thin cross section or thin wire and creating a polarization. So what I am going to do is I am going to deal with a small thin strip of wire which is electrically neutral, and then I create a slight polarization by some excitation using probably fast electrons, and what I will have is positive charges more to the left and negative charges to the right, and you have a gellium. Okay, this is basically both this thing, a positive background with this will be positive background with negative electrons which are spread out. Okay. So, now what happens is the electrons are being pulled by the positive charge. So, there will be a slight movement of the electrons. So, what happens is the electrons will start moving towards this, and when that happens this right end becomes positive, and that right end now pulls back the electrons, and the electrons will now go backwards this way. So, electrons are actually oscillating from left to right. So, what happens is that there is a positive charge on one end and negative charge on the other end at one moment. The positive charge attracts all the electron density towards it, and so there is a slight movement of the electron density to the left. But then as the electron density goes to the left, the negative end of the thin strip now becomes positive, and so that positive end pulls back the electrons, and so the electrons overshoot that positive end, and so they keep going back and forth if they are not getting damped. Now, in this picture also it is possible to obtain the same expression, and it is quite straightforward. So, what we have is the polarization that is developed. Polarization developed P is equal to minus NEX, where x is the displacement, n is the number of electrons, okay, and is the number density of electrons, number of electrons per unit volume, and x is the displacement. Given this, what we can now do is, from the polarization we can calculate what the electric field is. The electric field is actually given by E is equal to 4 pi p. So, the electric field now becomes minus 4 pi N E x. So, the force is now given by E times E. Force is given by E times the electric field E, which is minus 4 pi N E squared x. And this force is the one that is making this mass of the electrons go back and forth. So, I can write down the balancing part, which is mx double dot. Double dot means twice you differentiate x with respect to time. So, that is the acceleration. So, that is equal to minus 4 pi N E squared times x. So, right away you see that this is of the form that x double dot is equal to minus 4 pi N E squared by m times x, and so 4 pi N E squared is like the force constant, and so what you are going to have is omega p squared must be equal to k by m is equal to 4 pi N E squared by m. And we can also get an expression for the dielectric constant. To get the expression for the dielectric constant, what we will do is assume the electric field has the time dependence because x is moving, x is changing with time. Electric field also will have time dependence, and let us assume that it has a time dependence which is of the form E of t is equal to E omega e to the minus I omega t. X will also have a similar time dependence. X of t will be equal to x naught e to the minus I omega t. So what we can now get is an expression substituting this in the equation mx double dot. What we will get is the following. We get minus m omega squared x is equal to minus 4 pi n e squared e times omega times x. So I have E of omega is equal to 4 pi n e squared by m times omega squared, okay, because x cancels on both sides. So I have E omega of this form, and the displacement, electric displacement d, is given by d omega is equal to E plus 4 pi p omega and we have d omega is equal to E omega minus 4 pi n e squared by m omega squared into E omega. So given this, the dielectric constant is given by d omega divided by E omega, is the dielectric constant epsilon omega. So this is going to give me equal to 1 minus 4 pi n e squared upon m omega squared, or is equal to 1 minus omega p squared by omega squared. So this is exactly the same expression that I got before using the Maxwell's equations. So what it means is that it is actually something that represents the oscillation of the electron, the electrons up and down when you excite them, and this is a collective oscillation. All the electrons are moving together. Now if the dielectric constant epsilon omega is 1 minus omega p squared by omega squared, actually this expression is true for omega very large. Okay, so let me say omega large. So this expression is true when omega is large. So what it means is the following, that is, for small omega, epsilon omega is going to be negative, because for omega p less than omega, epsilon omega is negative, and epsilon omega is positive for omega greater than omega p. So here let me put it, let me be careful. So this is omega less than omega p. Now dielectric constant is related to the refractive index, complex refractive index, by the relationship epsilon omega is equal to n squared, where n is equal to n plus I k. N is a complex capital N is a complex refractive index, small n is the small n is the real part, and small k is the complex part. Given n, what one knows is that the reflectivity is given by 1 minus n by 1 plus n squared. So this turns out to be equal to, you can just substitute for n and then you will find out that this is equal to n minus 1 squared plus k squared divided by n plus 1 squared plus k squared. If n is pure imaginary, then small n is equal to 0 and reflectivity R is equal to 1. That means light of all frequencies less than the plasma frequency will be reflected completely, whereas light of frequency above omega p will have both reflection and absorption. Okay. Now let us see how it is going to explain the color of the metals and the luster of the metals. So what happens is that actually this expression is more or less correct even in the quantum sense. In the quantum sense, what you will have is you will have many different omegas coming in which are corresponding to the excitation of lower energies. We will talk about that at a later time perhaps. So you will have, instead of something like omega p squared by omega squared, you will have sigma over j some omega p squared by omega j squared times f of j, where f of j is some oscillator strength for the excitation, and omega j is the difference in energy between the ground state and the jth excitation. So one can actually do this. So what happens is that light of all wavelengths, so supposing, now let me see how we can explain, for example, the color of gold, silver and copper colors. Luster is because of the reflection, and the color, let us see why it is. So in the case of gold, the plasma frequency omega p is of the order of about 5.5 electron volts, and this is for gold. So omega p for gold, silver and copper goes as 5.5, 5.6 eV and 5.7 eV. So roughly a difference of about 0.1 electron volt in the plasma frequencies, and what it implies is the following, that is, most of the blue and green light is absorbed in the case of gold. In gold, most blue and green is absorbed because these are above 5.5 electron volts, so they will be absorbed, and yellow and red is reflected. A very small amount of red is reflected, and because of that the color of gold is yellow. Now in the case of silver, what happens is, in this case almost all the light is reflected. So what you have is equal reflection of all colors, and so you will have a white color of the gold and a luster because there is reflection. In the case of copper, yellow is also absorbed besides blue and green, and so what is left behind is red, and so what the color of copper is hence red. So you see, by understanding very simply, we have done nothing except classical calculations using Drude's model, assuming that there is a collision every tau seconds, and we have been able to get a whole lot of information about the optical properties of all these materials and also the conductivity and so on and so forth. Now let us see what we can say about the motion of electrons in the magnetic field. Okay. When we are having motion of the electrons in a magnetic field, then we have the Drude's equation, time dependent equation will now become dP by dt is equal to minus EP cross H by MC. You can see the equation, we will go back to the previous lectures and then see the equation that we have. So, here we have the equation which is dP by dt is equal to minus p by tau plus f of t, and f of t in this case will be what I wrote down. And what we can actually write down is, if H is applied, so here we only have a magnetic field, and so if H is applied in the z direction, what we will have is the following: dP z by dt equal to 0, and dpx by dt minus omega c times py, and dpy by dt is equal to minus omega c times px, and omega c is the cyclotron frequency, that is given by EH by MC. It is a measure of the strength of the this magnetic field as well. And what we have is, we have the electron actually going around in a circle in a plane, in the xy plane, and the frequency with which the electron is going around is given by Px is equal to P naught cos omega t, cos omega ct, and Py is equal to P naught sin omega ct. So, what you have is actually a motion which is circular in the plane perpendicular to the applied magnetic field. Now, the interesting situation arises when a current is also passing through the sample. Then we will know that you have a resistance, the resistivity of the sample changes with magnetic field, with magnitude of the magnetic field H. For example, I can say that resistivity rho of H is equal to Ex by Jx, where Ex is the electric field applied in the x direction and the Jx is the current that is flowing through. And this resistivity dependence on magnetic field is known as the magnetoresistance. So, rho of H is the magnetoresistance, which is actually very important in materials which have very large magnetoresistance. So, there are materials which are either tailored materials by actually putting alternately different layers of metals deposited on the particular this thing template, or you also have other kinds of materials like lanthanum, strontium, cobaltites, which have very large magnetoresistance. So, I do not know whether we will have an occasion to discuss those things, but nonetheless what I will do next in the next lecture is to discuss properties associated with application of magnetic field, which is basically the Hall effect and the magnetoresistance properties. Okay, so I will stop at this point for this lecture, and we will continue again in the next lecture with the Hall effect. Thank you.